Nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, Coaster Ridge was once a bustling amusement park, known for its towering roller coasters and picturesque setting. The park shut down in the late 1980s after a series of unexplained accidents and a particularly horrific incident where a car derailed on the infamous Iron Serpent coaster, killing 6 riders. Locals say the park is cursed, and its closure only intensified the legends. One foggy autumn evening, a group of teenagers dared each other to explore the abandoned park. Armed with flashlights and fueled by bravado, they ventured through the rusting gates. As they wandered among the decaying attractions, they noticed the Iron Serpent's silhouette, still looming ominously against the darkening sky. An eerie silence enveloped them, broken only by the creaking of metal and the rustling of leaves. Suddenly, the group heard the faint sound of carnival music, as if from a distant time. Following the sound, they arrived at the old carousel. To their shock, it began to turn slowly, its wooden horses bobbing up and down in the dim light. The music grew louder, distorted, and haunting. The leader of the group, Jake, approached the carousel, drawn to a horse with a twisted, almost lifelike expression. As he touched it, the carousel stopped abruptly, and a cold wind swept through the park. "Did you hear that?" whispered Emily, Jake's girlfriend, her voice trembling. A faint whisper seemed to emanate from the horse. "Ride with me." Terrified, they fled the carousel and ran towards the exit. But the park seemed to have a life of its own. Pathways twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of Coaster Ridge. The whispers grew louder, now echoing through the trees, calling each of them by name. Desperation gripped the teenagers as they realized they were hopelessly lost within the park's labyrinthine paths. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the shadows grew longer, stretching out like skeletal fingers. Jake, Emily, and their friends stumbled through the darkness, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, the whispers now a constant murmur in their ears. "Guys, we have to stick together," Jake urged, trying to keep his voice steady despite his growing panic. "We'll find a way out." They rounded a corner and came upon the Ferris wheel, its skeletal frame looming like a ghost in the mist. As they approached, the air grew colder, and the scent of something metallic and sweet, blood, perhaps, hung heavy in the air. "Did you hear that?" whispered Sarah, her eyes wide with fear. It sounded like crying. The faint sound of a child sobbing drifted through the night, drawing them closer to the Ferris wheel. As they reached the base, they saw a small figure sitting in one of the carriages, its face obscured by shadow. Emily gasped, recognizing the old, tattered dress and the unmistakable shape of a child's figure. "It's just a doll," Jake said, but his voice wavered. He reached out, his fingers brushing the fabric, and the figure's head snapped up. Glassy, lifeless eyes stared back at him, and the doll's mouth opened in a silent scream. The Ferris wheel creaked to life, turning slowly as the doll's head followed them. "Run!" Emily screamed, yanking Jake back. They sprinted through the fog, the sound of the Ferris wheel grinding against rusted metal echoing behind them. They burst into the main square of the park, panting and terrified. The once vibrant and colorful attractions now appeared twisted and grotesque in the moonlight. Suddenly, the old carousel, which they had fled earlier, lit up with a sickly yellow glow. The horses, with their gnarled, twisted faces, began to move again, their hollow eyes seeming to follow the teenagers. "We need to find the exit," Sarah cried, tears streaming down her face. "This place is a nightmare." The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the park itself were alive, hungry for their fear. The paths seemed to twist and change before their eyes, leading them in circles. Despair settled in, but Jake forced himself to stay focused. "Over there," he pointed to a dilapidated ticket booth near the entrance. "Maybe there's a map or something." They rushed to the booth, but as they searched, the whispers converged into a single, eerie chant. "You can never leave." The booth's old speaker crackled to life, and a distorted voice filled the air. "Welcome to Coaster Ridge," it intoned. "Enjoy your stay." The ground beneath them began to shake, and they watched in horror as the pavement cracked and split open. From the depths emerged the ghostly figures of the 6 victims of the Iron Serpent disaster, their eyes hollow and accusing. "You did this," one of them rasped, reaching out with a skeletal hand. "You brought us here." Emily backed away, shaking her head. "No, we didn't. We just wanted to see." "See the horrors of Coaster Ridge?" the ghost interrupted. "Now you are part of it." The fog thickened, and the air grew impossibly cold. The teenagers felt an invisible force pulling them towards the Iron Serpent. The ride, dormant for decades, now thrummed with a sinister energy, its cars gleaming in the pale moonlight. "No, please," Sarah sobbed, clutching at Jake. "We have to get out of here." But the force was relentless, dragging them closer to the coaster. The whispers reached a fever pitch, mingling with the distorted laughter of children and the screams of the damned. As they were pulled into the waiting cars of the Iron Serpent, they felt a chilling realization settle over them. They were the newest victims of Coaster Ridge, forever trapped in its nightmarish embrace. The coaster jerked to life, climbing the first hill with a mechanical roar. The fog closed in, swallowing the park and its captives whole. As the Iron Serpent plummeted into darkness, the screams of the teenagers echoed through the abandoned park, mingling with the ghosts of the past, and Coaster Ridge waited, patient and eternal, for its next visitors. The Iron Serpent's cars hurtled down the track with terrifying speed, the screams of the teenagers blending with the wails of the park's restless spirits. The ride twisted and turned through the dense fog, the world around them a blur of shadows and cold. Biting wind as they reached the peak of the highest hill, time seemed to slow. Jake, Emily, Sarah, and the others exchanged desperate, terrified glances. The ride paused, teetering on the edge, giving them a fleeting moment of eerie silence. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to think of a way to escape the park's malevolent grasp. "Hold on!" Jake shouted, reaching for Emily's hand. But before he could grasp it, the coaster plunged downward. The speed was dizzying, the force of the descent pressing them into their seats. The fog seemed to swallow them whole, the tracks below an endless, nightmarish path. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the ride came to a jarring stop in complete darkness. Gasping for breath, they found themselves in the Iron Serpent station. The air was thick and musty, the shadows dense and oppressive. The whispers had ceased, replaced by an unnerving silence. Slowly, cautiously, they climbed out of the cars. "Where are we?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake looked around, trying to orient himself. "I don't know, but we need to keep moving. There has to be a way out." They moved through the station, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. As they reached the exit, they saw a faint, flickering light ahead. Hope surged within them as they quickened their pace, following the light to a decrepit maintenance building. Inside, the flickering light revealed an old control room. Dust-covered monitors and ancient equipment lined the walls, and in the center of the room stood a single, glowing monitor displaying a map of Coaster Ridge. The exit was marked in bright red. "There!" Sarah pointed, her eyes wide with relief. "The exit is just past the old funhouse." The group navigated the dilapidated pathways, their eyes constantly darting around for any sign of movement. The funhouse loomed ahead, its garish paint faded and peeling, the entrance a gaping maw. "We have to go through it," Jake said, steeling himself. "Stay close." They entered the funhouse, the distorted mirrors and twisting corridors playing tricks on their minds. Laughter, high-pitched and mocking, echoed through the halls, and they felt unseen eyes watching them. "Keep moving," Jake urged, gripping Emily's hand tightly. They navigated the maze of horrors, the laughter growing louder and more menacing. Finally, they burst out the other side, the exit gates visible ahead. Relief washed over them as they sprinted towards freedom. But just as they reached the gates, the ground began to tremble once more. The fog thickened, and the spectral figures of the park's victims appeared, blocking their path. "You cannot leave," one of the ghosts intoned. "You are part of Coaster Ridge now." "No!" Jake shouted, stepping forward. "We didn't mean for this to happen. We just wanted to see." The ghost raised a hand, silencing him. "You have disturbed our rest. To leave, you must set us free." "How?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Find Ezekiel Blackwood's amulet," the ghost replied. "Destroy it, and the curse will be lifted." With no other choice, the group turned back towards the park. Following the ghost's directions, they made their way to the heart of Coaster Ridge, where the old Blackwood mansion lay in ruins. The mansion, a crumbling relic of a bygone era, exuded an air of malevolence. Inside, they searched frantically, overturning furniture and prying open floorboards. The whispers returned, guiding them to a hidden compartment beneath the grand staircase. Inside, they found a blackened, ornate amulet pulsating with a dark energy. "This must be it," Jake said, his voice barely a whisper. "Now what?" Sarah asked, eyeing the amulet warily. "We destroy it," Jake said, raising a heavy stone. With a final, decisive blow, he smashed the amulet to pieces. A blinding light filled the room, and the air seemed to vibrate with a powerful force. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, and then, abruptly, everything fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and a sense of peace settled over the park as they made their way back to the exit. The ghostly figures reappeared, their expressions now serene. "Thank you," the lead ghost said, his form becoming translucent. "You have set us free." The teenagers watched in awe as the spirits faded into the ether, finally at rest. They pushed open the gates, stepping out into the cool night air. The park behind them was now silent, its dark power broken as they walked away. Jake glanced back at Coaster Ridge one last time. The park, once a place of nightmares, now stood as a silent testament to the horrors they had overcome. He took Emily's hand, and together they walked into the dawn, leaving the haunted past behind. But deep within the shadows of the abandoned park, a faint whisper echoed, "We'll be waiting." Whispering Pines Amusement Park, built in the 1950s, was famous for its vintage charm and old-world attractions. But behind its cheerful facade lay a dark secret. In the summer of 1963, a young girl named Sarah disappeared while riding the park's beloved Ferris wheel. Despite an extensive search, she was never found, and rumors of her ghost haunting the park began to spread. Years later, the park continued to operate, though attendance had waned. One night, the park's security guard, Tom, was making his rounds when he heard soft giggling near the Ferris wheel. Following the sound, he saw a little girl in a white dress standing by the ride, her back turned to him. As he approached, she vanished, leaving only the faint scent of lilies in the air. Over the next few nights, Tom became obsessed with the apparition. He began to see her everywhere, peeking out from behind the ticket booth, reflected in the funhouse mirrors, and always near the Ferris wheel. Determined to uncover the truth, he started digging into the park's history and learned about Sarah's disappearance. One particularly stormy night, Tom decided to confront the ghost. Armed with an old photograph of Sarah and a locket he found in the park's archives, he approached the Ferris wheel. Lightning cracked across the sky as he called out to her, holding up the photo and locket. "Sarah, if you're here, show yourself," he pleaded. The Ferris wheel began to turn slowly, despite the power being off. In the flickering light of the storm, Sarah appeared at the top, looking down at Tom with sad, hollow eyes. The ride stopped and she pointed towards the forest beyond the park. Gathering his courage, Tom followed her silent directive into the woods, where he stumbled upon an old, overgrown well. Inside, he found a tattered doll and a set of bones wrapped in a decaying dress. As he realized what he had discovered, a whisper echoed through the trees. "Thank you." Tom stood by the well, the realization of what he had uncovered sinking in. The remains of Sarah, the girl who had vanished all those years ago, lay before him. A sense of both dread and resolve filled him. He knew he had to give her a proper burial to finally lay her spirit to rest gently. Tom gathered the bones and the tattered doll, wrapping them in his jacket. As he stood up, he felt a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he saw Sarah's ghost, her expression no longer sad but hopeful. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying on the wind. Tom nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "I'll make sure you're properly taken care of." As he made his way back through the forest towards the park, the eerie silence was replaced by the faint sounds of the past, the laughter of children, the hum of the rides, and the distant melody of carnival music. It was as if the park was coming back to life, offering a glimpse of what it once was. Tom reached the entrance, where he was met by the park's manager, Mr. Hargrove, and a few concerned employees. They had noticed Tom's absence and the strange occurrences of the night. "Tom, what's going on?" Mr. Hargrove asked, his face pale with worry. "I found her," Tom said, his voice steady. "Sarah, we need to give her a proper burial." Mr. Hargrove's eyes widened in shock. "Sarah? After all these years?" Tom nodded. "Yes, I found her remains in the old well. She needs to be put to rest." With the help of the park staff, Tom arranged for a small, respectful ceremony the next morning. The local authorities were informed, and a priest was brought in to perform the rites. The townspeople, many of whom remembered the tragedy, gathered to pay their respects as the sun rose over Whispering Pines. Casting a golden light over the park, Sarah's remains were laid to rest in a small cemetery just outside the park's boundaries. The priest recited prayers, and the crowd stood in solemn silence. Tom watched as Sarah's spirit appeared one last time, her form radiant and peaceful. She smiled at him, mouthing the words "thank you," before fading into the light. The ceremony ended, and the crowd slowly dispersed. Tom felt a sense of peace and closure. The park seemed different now, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The shadows that had once haunted it were gone, and the whispers had ceased as the days passed. Whispering Pines began to thrive once more. Families returned, and the laughter of children filled the air. The rides operated without incident, and the eerie occurrences became a distant memory. Tom continued to work at the park, but he was no longer the haunted man he had been. He knew that Sarah's spirit had been laid to rest, and that the park was finally free of its dark past. One evening, as Tom was making his rounds, he stopped by the Ferris wheel. The setting sun bathed the park in a warm, golden glow. He looked up at the ride, and for a moment, he thought he saw Sarah's figure, smiling and waving at him from the topmost carriage. He smiled back, a sense of calm settling over him. Whispering Pines had been given a second chance, and so had he. As he walked away, the park lights flickered on, and the sounds of joy and celebration filled the air once more. And though the ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, the story of Whispering Pines and its haunted Ferris wheel would live on, a reminder of the power of remembrance and the importance of laying old spirits to rest. Shadow Valley Amusement Park was built on the grounds of an old homestead, rumored to be cursed by its original owner, Ezekiel Blackwood. Legend had it that Blackwood was a reclusive man who dabbled in dark magic, cursing the land when he died under mysterious circumstances. Despite the warnings, the park thrived for decades until a series of bizarre incidents began to plague it. Employees reported strange occurrences: lights flickering, rides operating by themselves, and eerie laughter echoing through the empty park at night. Visitors claimed to see shadows moving in the corners of their eyes and to feel cold hands touching them on the rides. One summer, a paranormal investigation team decided to spend a night at Shadow Valley. Equipped with cameras and recording devices, they set up in the park's most notorious spots: the haunted house, the ghost train, and the site of the old homestead. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with tension in the haunted house. The lead investigator, Rachel, felt a sudden drop in temperature, her breath visible in the cold. She asked, "Is anyone here with us?" A loud bang answered her, followed by a disembodied voice, "Leave!" Meanwhile, in the ghost train, another investigator, Mark, saw a shadowy figure standing at the end of the track. He shone his flashlight on it, but it vanished, leaving behind a chill that seeped into his bones. His camera captured the faint outline of a man with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. Back at the homestead site, the team gathered to review their findings. As they watched the footage, the shadows on the screen seemed to move independently, forming words, "Get out." Just then, the ground beneath them began to rumble. The air grew thick with the scent of sulfur, and a low, guttural growl emanated from the darkness. The team scrambled to pack their equipment, but the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around them, whispering ancient curses. They ran towards the park's exit, but the gates slammed shut with a deafening clang. The shadows followed, relentless, as the whispers grew louder, promising eternal darkness. The paranormal investigation team huddled together, their faces pale with fear as the ground rumbled and shadows swirled around them. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur, and an oppressive darkness pressed in from all sides. They knew they had to act quickly to break Ezekiel Blackwood's curse and escape Shadow Valley Amusement Park. "Destroy the amulet?" Rachel gasped, clutching at her equipment. "We need to find and destroy Blackwood's amulet." They ran back towards the old Blackwood mansion, the shadows clawing at their heels. The mansion loomed ahead, its decaying structure a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. They burst through the front door, the air inside cold and still. "This way!" Mark shouted, leading them to the hidden basement where Blackwood had performed his dark rituals. The walls were lined with arcane symbols and ancient texts, and in the center of the room stood an altar with a blackened, ornate amulet pulsating with malevolent energy. "There it is," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "We need to destroy it." As they approached the altar, a spectral figure materialized before them. It was Ezekiel Blackwood himself, his eyes burning with hatred. "You dare defy me?" he hissed, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You will join the others in eternal torment." The shadows around them intensified, coalescing into ghastly forms that reached out with clawed hands. The team backed away, fear gripping their hearts. "We have to do this now," Mark shouted, grabbing a heavy iron rod from the corner of the room. Rachel nodded, steeling herself. Together, with a fierce determination, they advanced on the altar. Blackwood's ghost surged forward, but Rachel and Mark struck the amulet with the iron rod, channeling all their strength into the blow. The amulet shattered with a resounding crack, sending a shockwave of energy through the room. Blackwood's ghost let out a blood-curdling scream as his form began to dissolve. The shadows writhed and shrieked before disintegrating into nothingness. The oppressive darkness lifted, replaced by a calm, soothing light that filled the chamber. Outside, the park began to transform. The rides, once twisted and haunted, regained their former glory. The eerie laughter and whispers ceased, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant calls of night creatures. The curse had been broken. The team emerged from the mansion, blinking in the light of the dawning sun. The park, now serene and peaceful, seemed almost inviting. They could feel the difference in the air, a sense of liberation and renewal. As they walked towards the exit, they saw the spectral figures of the park's victims one last time. But now, their expressions were calm and grateful. They nodded to the investigators, their forms slowly fading into the light. "Thank you," one of the spirits said, their voice a gentle whisper on the breeze. "We are free." The gates of Shadow Valley swung open, welcoming them to step through. The team exchanged relieved smiles, feeling the weight of the night's horrors lift from their shoulders. They walked out of the park, leaving behind the memories of the curse that had plagued it for so long. And the days that followed, Shadow Valley Amusement Park was restored and reopened to the public. Families returned, and the sounds of laughter and joy filled the air. The legend of Ezekiel Blackwood and his curse became a distant memory, a story to tell around campfires and in hushed whispers. The investigation team, now heroes in the eyes of the town, continued their work, but they would never forget the night they faced the darkness of Shadow Valley and emerged victorious. They had not only freed the park but had also discovered the strength within themselves to overcome the darkest of evils. And though Shadow Valley stood as a testament to their bravery, the echoes of their adventure would remain, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable terror, courage and determination can bring light to the darkest of places.